which is Biofuels Manufacturing of Illinois. Peter Johnson and Sudhir Seth are two of the corporate folks that are working on that program and sort of spearheading the development of pennycress for Illinois. Terry was fortunate to be working on the first sort of commercial scale field production just south of the Caterpillar plant on 24, and he's going to give us a little update on how that went. Terry.
Okay, thanks Wynn for having us over today. You've got a nice demo plots. I always like coming here, and you did a nice job with pennycress today. Yes, these are the two commercial lines that they're not really commercial lines. These are wild fields. This is harvest of a wild field and was put back out. And these are actually 1 mile apart, and there are quite a bit of differences in those. So Wynn will probably find some variability, I imagine, even within McDonough County. And they are, if you look in your roadsides and in your fields, you'll see these plants all over, particularly if you look in late May, because they'll have already flowered and they'll be senesced, so they'll be yellow and everything else will be green. And they're easy to pick out because it's the only thing that's dead along the roadsides at the end of May. And so you can drive along at 70 miles an hour and go, there's a pennycress, there's a pennycress, there's a pennycress, and they're sort of everywhere. I don't know if they were originally native. I think they came into the U.S. from wheat imports, but I don't know that for sure. That's what people suppose. So they're native now because they've been here forever, and you'll find them everywhere. This is a crop. The key thing you got to remember about pennycress is this is a double crop rotation that finishes, right now this crop finishes the first week of June, and that's important so you get a full season soybean. That's the number one thing, and that's why we got interested in it. And Wynn's got a nice demonstration of these winter and spring annuals. And so we put out a field, a bulk field with this company called BMI down in Mapleton, Illinois. And this was about a 17-acre field, and we took samples out of the field along with doing bulk harvest. And we did a couple things to look at harvest yield. So we looked at a single plant, and we knew how many seeds were in every pod. And Ben and I, my technician, we went out there and we counted single plants in specific spots all across the field in early April, and we did a yield estimate. And we got somewhere on some parts of the field 50 pounds per acre, on another part all the way up to 7,000 pounds of seed per acre. And so when you take a small sample, you get a bad number. So later on, as we came down to the harvest date, we went in and took meter blocks. That's a common thing for breeders and agronomists to do, is we took meter blocks out of the field. And then that same day, we harvested big blocks with the combine and made some comparisons. At the end of the day, the whole field averaged probably about 850 pounds of seed per acre off this wild field. We also confirmed on our high-end meter blocks, we had stuff that went up to about 1,400 pounds of seed per acre. It turned out within that block, we got a very near sample with the combine. We were within about 60 pounds of that hand sample. And those single plant samples down in that row were within that same range. So we know there's some seed yield variability. We expect to see that seed number probably approach 2,000 or so pounds of seed per acre. So first year out, you get 800 to 900 pounds of seed per acre off of what is a wild plant is unbelievable. As a new crop person, you go in there and you usually get about 100 to 200 pounds of seed like Kufia, and then you struggle with that for years on end. And I've seen that all across the United States. So this started at a level that was considerably higher than almost any other new crop that you would start to develop. And within this year, we then pulled out samples that were trying to move the maturity date earlier. We saw plants that matured probably about 8 to 10 days earlier than the bulk of the field. Wynn has those seeds. We're going to evaluate those and see if that's real or not. So we're going to try to move that date back into May for harvest. But right now, it's the first week of June. This BMI plant that Wynn mentioned is actually, if you read the news this week and you looked at what the governor signed, he passed the Capitol bill, the legislature did, the governor signed it, and this plant, BMI, is going to get $5 million, which was the last little chunk of money that they were looking for to get their plant started, and they expect to break ground this fall in Mapleton, Illinois, which is about 15 to 20 miles just sort of south of Peoria along Route 24. And it's right next to the big Caterpillar plant if you've ever driven along there. It's right next door to it. And so about 18 months later, we'll see biodiesel production starting out of that facility, and they're basing biodiesel production on pennycress. They are going to consume soybean oil in the early phases, and they would like to transition into pennycress. There are a number of other crops that you could potentially move through that plant. So pennycress is one. Camelina might suit the bill. soybean can definitely go through there. And so this facility is being built on the premise of multiple feedstocks entering that facility. And so you don't have to bet your horse on one crop. And the other thing is you don't want to drive the price of the crop up as you start to consume resources, which we kind of see in this fuel thing. So you're really trying to minimize this fuel versus food issue. I knew I could mess up. Pretty straightforward crop to manage. There's no herbicides registered yet, so if you're going to, in the future, you think about putting this field out, you're going to have to go on a field that's not very weedy. You're competing against winter annuals, so you're looking at winter annuals. So there are some winds working on herbicide issues, what we might be able to put down in here. We had about 7 different fields out this year. One of the fields was completely weed-free with no herbicides. It was on a clean field. It maintained it. There were really no weeds in that field. And the BMI field, it was full of weeds. But it was full of weeds before we started. So you kind of get what you start with. I mean, there's really no surprise. You start with weeds, you're going to get weeds. So I guess if you have any questions, I can try to address them.